This episode of Film And was pre-recorded on April 12th, 2021. Welcome back to Film And. As always, I'm Connor. I'm joined by my good friend Dan.
Howdy.
And then Dan, this is a special one.
Yeah.
This is the big one,
this
as the kids
is
say.
The big concept that we've been building to all season. Something I think we're very excited to cover.
The 50 Shades trilogy.
Yes. No. Basically, this is a series we have entitled Best Picture 75, where we are going to discuss the 5 movies from 1975 that were nominated for Best Picture in the 1976 Oscars. And basically, since we're going to go pretty in-depth with all of these, this is a 2-parter episode, so you will be hearing the second half of our thoughts next week. But for just a little synopsis, it's very interesting because we found the 5 movies that were nominated were 5 really, I think, important movies, not only for the 1970s, but for the directors who directed them.
Yeah.
For each of these directors, I think you just have some of their most acclaimed work. Sidney Lumet's Dog Day Afternoon. You have Stanley Kubrick's Barry Lyndon, Jaws, the classic Spielberg blockbuster.
Yeah, the first blockbuster. Robert
Altman's Nashville. And then Milos Forman's One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. 5 amazing movies that
each iconic in their own right.
Yeah, and I think did a lot to kind of define what Hollywood was in the mid-70s.
Yeah.
And just kind of moving forward with the future of cinema in America. So we're starting off with Dog Day Afternoon. Now, something we should mention, we have special guest here, Steve Heron. Steve, you want to say hi? You know, he's not here yet.
I was like, are you going to insert the audio of Steve
I'm not
going
to insert the audio. But basically, the way we're doing it is that not all of us are talking about all 5 movies. We will be interchanging. So as the segments go in and out, you will only ever be hearing 2 of us talking. So for this first installment, it is me and Connor discussing Dog Day Afternoon. And then Steve will come in probably for the next one, Jaws.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess starting it up, we have Dog Day Afternoon. Let's get into it. The way we're structuring these sections for each of the movies, we're putting into 4 parts. We're going to talk kind of like a summary of the movie, kind of our thoughts on watching it, our experience of watching these movies and what we think, kind of its journey to Best Picture, how we feel like it got there, how it deserves to be there perhaps or not, and then the legacy of this movie, you know, like what has the lasting legacy been and what does it mean to watch these movies today. So Dog Day Afternoon, classic film, 1975. Sidney Lumet, which you also might know from 12 Angry Men, the other, I think, really big film that Sidney Lumet directed.
Yeah.
Basically, quick description. Based on a true story of would-be Brooklyn bank robbers John Łukasz and Salvatore Natural. Sonny and Sal attempt a bank heist which quickly turns sour and escalates into a hostage situation and standoff with the police. As Sonny's motives for the robbery are slowly revealed and things become more complicated, the heist turns into a media circus. Iconically starring Al Pacino and John Cazale in
one of Cazale's 4 movies.
5, right?
5?
Yeah. The Conversation.
In The Conversation, you're right.
Easy to forget that one. But yeah. So, what do we think about this?
I think this is a very good movie. Okay. And it's we'll talk about this later because we're going to have a little segment, I think, actually devoted to it.
Yes.
But I think this should have won Best Picture. Because the funny thing is, Dan, is you say this is the best year for motion pictures at the Academy Awards for Best Picture. Mm-hmm. And that's a sentiment that is shared by this Vanity Fair article.
Yeah.
I don't share that sentiment.
Interesting.
I think this year has one great movie, one good one, and 3 okay ones.
Whoa.
Which that's the controversy.
My head is spinning, man. What are you talking about?
And I know you know this opinion.
Yeah.
This is for the people at home who are not aware of me already saying, Dan, year is kind of overhyped. It is a very good year though. But as I mentioned, this is the great movie.
Yeah.
This is by far, at least to me, the best picture that year because it's a whole star above the one that I would put in second place.
When you're talking your Letterboxd rankings.
Yeah, I'm talking Letterboxd rankings, yes.
I mean, what's funny, because for me, I look at this, I feel like this year has 3 great movies and 2 okay movies. Mm-hmm. One, I definitely put above the other in its okayness.
Yeah.
So I can understand that sentiment because I think for a lot of people, at least for me, I think for both of us, these 5 movies, they don't represent the apex of the Hollywood Renaissance or the apex of cinema in the 70s. I think they just more represent 5 important moments. Whether we personally like them or not, that's aside the point.
Well, no, I think 3 of these movies are average.
Yeah.
But I would never say they're not important for the context of their time, or I'm not going to say the directors behind them are shams or quacks or anything. I'm not going to say like, you'll figure it out. I think Barry Lyndon is one of the okay movies. I'm not going to say Kubrick's like a hack because I don't like Barry Lyndon.
He's a hack. He's a quack.
Yeah, here's the thing. I need to watch more Kubrick because I think he's heavily fascinating. The thing I like the most about Barry Lyndon is the direction.
Yeah.
So he's an incredibly talented guy. I'm not casting any aspersions on any of the other 3 filmmakers. I feel the movies are average.
Yeah.
But no, but we're getting lost in the woods here.
Yes.
Dog Day Afternoon. What a goofy day. What a wild ride.
I think for me, I saw this for the first time a year ago this coming Wednesday. So this was actually one of the many, many movies I watched for the first time during lockdown, spring of 2020. And in many senses, because I did do a little research on this right after I'd seen it for the first time, I was thinking about it. And I realized that this is the movie that started it all. Like, I think it's easy to go back and watch this movie and be like, oh, okay, it's just a guy doing a bank robbery. Oh, and there's a hostage situation. Oh, and he does this and he does that, and there's crowds and everyone, the news is watching. But at this time, this was not a thing yet. This wasn't a stereotype. This wasn't an overplayed trope in like a cop drama you'd see on TV. This was revolutionary.
Yeah.
And what I love so much is that Dog Day Afternoon, I think, represents best what America was feeling in 1975. I guess in my research, I found that this was a really fascinating time capsule. It's an encapsulation of, I think, the unrest of the everyday man coming out after Nixon resigning and Vietnam, after a decade of Vietnam, basically. There's a lot of social unrest, and the way Sidney Lumet frames Al Pacino's character as a sympathetic villain, but also anti-hero, really I think captures the struggle of someone who's trying to live in this world.
It is the whole bank robber, like I mentioned, it started a lot of tropes. It's the guy who's a very good person who's forced into a bad situation, and throughout this bad situation, he's still trying his best to be a good person because he is. And at the end, he's doing this whole robbery for someone he loves, his partner Leon.
Who, as we know, he is robbing the bank for the gender transition surgery Leon is attempting to fund.
So he's doing this for the person he loves to finally feel comfortable in their own skin.
Exactly.
Which is a beautiful, thought out motivation. And we should mention, obviously, before we get too lost, this is a true story.
Yeah, this is based on a true story. Obviously, it takes some liberties, but at the end of the day, it sticks pretty close to the events.
So the real guy, which I feel bad forgetting his name here, but the real guy was doing the exact same thing for his partner. Mm-hmm. And it's funny you mentioned, Dan, speaking like this being a time capsule for its time. That's a repetitive sentence I just said, but one of the big improvisations was him screaming Attica with the cops outside.
Yes,
which obviously
the iconic line, referencing the prison,
the Attica prison riots
that left dozens of prisoners dead.
Yes, that happened in 4 years earlier in 1971. So he was talking, for those of context, he's in a scene where he's outside the bank. and he's screaming Attica at the police, referencing the excessive police force used in the Attica prison riot 4 years previous, like I mentioned. So it's things like that. It's a direct time capsule for the 70s, and speaking against like unrest against the police and like how the system's governed, and sadly, still stuff we're dealing with today with policing.
And what I really like is that Sidney Lumet, I think, takes the most interesting angle to look at this, because the way the media is kind of framed in this film is in a very exploitative way. Like in many ways, a lot of it feels like you're watching the live newscast outside the bank, and then inside the bank is the movie. But like even we don't see any like news reports going on. We just see news people reporting. It still stays in that frame of the camera. But the entire time, like I feel like the camera just feels like it's so intrusive and exploitative to the story. Like when it's trying to get Leon's take, you just see crowds of people and microphones and cameras being shoved every which way. And it's this kind of media frenzy that I think Lumet captures so well in this time of like real life stories and media being shown for the first time in like America's living rooms, you know? Because like obviously the shock to the system of having these visions of Vietnam being shown right in your living room for the first time in the 60s and the 70s was huge. It was jarring, and it changed the way we see the world from like a home standpoint. And having these more down-to-earth, in-the-moment breaking news stories, that was another like revolutionary moment in the 60s and 70s. And
it's people realizing like people who love America, patriots. The whole thing of seeing the Vietnam War for the first time, they realized that we are no longer just the cut and dry good guys in the world. And now we're seeing this person who they don't really. I mean, here's the thing. There's been a lot of stuff. People in the 70s not a huge fan of the fact that Al Pacino's character is in love with a trans woman. People were very upset, and they said very bad things to the screen when they saw that.
Doubt it.
So it's a thing where it's like the media circus this does cause, and the media's kind of like, how would they judge him knowing that's what his intentions are? It's interesting that it makes a lot of commentaries and like, it's a wild ride. It's a very intense thing, and it's one of those things to talk about where it's like, it feels like it's above my pay grade to talk about like culture and like perception and like changing viewpoints of how we view ourselves through what we are shown in media. And it's like not even just like media per se, but like the news, facts. Like it's just like you're exposed fully. They're seeing it in your own home, the comfort of your own home, like the atrocities that we as Americans are capable of, and how we're willing to ignore someone and get them in this state where they have to do an act of violence, even though Sonny tries his best not to be violent. To do this act of violence or to do something just good for someone they love.
And I think it's so interesting that the framework of making this, like doing a true story, making this based on a true story is so interesting, translating the violence that I think we've been exporting to the world and showing that like this tension, this anger is here, it's right at home, and it's happening to everyone around us, you know, like, and it involves all of us.
We are part of the system that put Sonny in that bank on that day.
And I guess if we're talking, moving on to the third section, the Academy nominating this for Best Picture. Amazing, mostly because this movie was a hit with the critics. But again, a lot of moviegoers just put off by its third-rail gay subplot, which was very damaging to the film's image at the time. I think this, of all 5 movies, is a testament to the Academy recognizing films that comment on the real world.
This and stories. Nashville.
This and Nashville, all the two that do it. I think obviously Dog Day, grittier, because it really is about like one person, Al Pacino, and his buddy, John Cazale.
And his friend.
Oh, and his friend
and
who
the third
leaves.
guy who dips pretty early.
The third guy who dips like 10 minutes in. Like I always forget he was technically part of it. I don't know. I feel like this movie, among others, kind of starts this trend. You look at the 60s and you just see a lot of films that are fictional. And really the history of the Academy nominating for Best Picture films, fictional stories, historical stories. But in the 70s, you start to see this shift into more like realism. Films that depict realism in ways like Dog Day. And Dog Day Afternoon is one of the films that I think is a real bastion for like one of the first films that gets recognized at such a high level.
And obviously, like we mentioned audience perception of this film. This is the first time the Oscars really like starts nominating like crowd pleasers per se, like you mentioned with Jaws being the first blockbuster. And speaking of Al Pacino,
Yeah, I mean the whole Pacino factor
Yeah.
of like I think this is one of his most like forgotten great roles.
yeah,
Like I think not enough people go back and be like Sal in Dog Day Afternoon. Not Sal. It's John. Is it John?
he's Sonny.
He's Sonny. Sorry. Wait. His name is Sonny in this.
Yes.
And in Godfather.
No, his name is Michael in Godfather. His brother is Sonny.
Oh wait. So John Cazale is.
John Cazale's Fredo.
Oh, he's Fredo, and Sonny is freaking James Caan. Oh my god.
Yeah.
I hate. I have not seen Godfather since like high school.
Yeah, it's a big old name circle.
Anyways. Moving.
Yes, but hey,
Bring
bring up Godfather.
Al Pacino with the Godfather, like the legendary status that you have Al Pacino at this point in his career. Serpico, Godfather. Having him do a role like this, oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Or he had just finished Godfather 2 when he was offered this role.
Exactly.
Yeah, which apparently the little bit of fun trivia fact is he turned this down originally because he's method and he didn't want to like put himself through the stress every day. But then he heard they were offering it to Dustin Hoffman, and he was like, Dustin Hoffman's not going to get my role. So he took it. Apparently, it's weird to think they were like rivals in the 70s. Like they were fighting for the same parts.
Bizarre.
Because both are iconic actors in their own right.
Yeah.
But like you mentioned, I think this does kind of get lost in the shuffle of like Al Pacino is the Godfather guy.
Yeah.
Because I think for a lot of people, that's just hearing it's, or what would come later, he's Scarface.
Yeah, exactly.
That's his whole thing.
Coming 8 years later in 1983, Scarface.
Yeah.
And I feel like looking back for people in our generation, having Dog Day kind of get sandwiched in between Godfather and Scarface for his iconic roles, kind of a bum rap.
Especially because, like, controversial opinion, Dan. I think this is his best performance. I think this is the best he's ever been.
I think this is his best performance.
And here's the,
I'm looking at him. Yeah, this is it.
There's
this
still
is the
some
one.
like selected movies of his I need to watch, but for my money, this is Al Pacino's best performance, and that's a best performance from an already incredible actor.
Yeah, I mean, and he just has so many credits. I mean, Once Upon a Time, but he's
barely in Once Upon a Time.
You got Irishman, Heat, Insomnia, Ocean's 13, Scent of a Woman, Serpico. I mean, Glengarry Glen Ross. Yeah, so many iconic roles from Al Pacino, but like I think this is the one that really is for me his best. Yeah. This is the one you can look back on and be like, that was truly amazing.
And the final thing is
the legacy.
The legacy.
What is the legacy of this film? I
think sadly it doesn't have a wide legacy in terms of like audiences our age. I'm sure people who grew up watching it, like saw it in the theaters in '75, still love this movie and still talk to their kids about it. And like obviously I'm sure there's people who love Dog Day Afternoon and discuss it in that way, but kids our age don't really talk about Dog Day Afternoon, with the exception of like if you're in film school and you have to watch it for a class.
It's not popularly regarded in like the mainstream.
Like you said, it gets lost in the shuffle pretty easily.
Yeah,
just a bummer.
It is kind of like, and I can understand why that gets lost below other gritty 70s movies that I think are more remembered.
Or like literally 2 years previous, The Godfather.
Exactly.
So, yeah. No, but I think you mentioned earlier, you alluded to this, is it's heavily influential for just bank robbery stories in film, period.
Yeah.
Like I mentioned, the guy is a good dude, just caught up in some stuff, and is now in a situation where he has no way out.
And when you look at like this kind of story, this kind of structure, it makes sense that this is the guy who also directed 12 Angry Men.
Yeah.
Because isn't it so beautiful how he directs this entire hostage situation? I mean, again, I think having it be so aged, I'm not exactly on the edge of my seat the whole time, but I can understand the effect that Sidney Lumet is like grasping towards.
Seeing this in a theater would have been like insanity.
I would have
can't imagine.
Been shaking, man.
I can't imagine.
Like, oh my goodness.
Because I saw this for the first time sophomore year.
Yeah.
On just like in my room, sitting on one of those not beanbag chairs, those like weird like moon chair things.
Yeah, I was in my bed probably eating noodles.
Yeah.
Just like, hey, I'll just watch Dog Day. Why not?
No, uncomfortable situation, literally like looking up at the screen. I was not looking at a proper angle at all. And I was just like mystified the entire time.
Yeah.
Incredibly gripping movie. And just the pace this thing unravels at. Like once he pulls the gun out of the flower box, it's a mile a minute.
It is.
It never lets up until literally the very end,
the final minutes.
The final minutes.
Final 60 seconds of the film, because this thing is just full on till the very end. The bitter end. Oh, Jon Kezale.
And Jon Kezale, incredible talent. But like I mentioned, if you're asking me, if I was on the Academy in 1975, I'd go into the room where we all probably have like brunch and eat donuts. I'd slam my hand on the table and I would say, "You other voter guy," who's also like a middle-aged white man.
Hello.
Thank you for playing the part of the middle-aged voter man.
You're welcome.
We need to put Dog Day. That is the best picture. And they're going to shove me and you say, "I like Jaws." And I'll be like, "Good for you, but it's no Dog Day, sir."
It's no Dog Day. Nuh-uh.
Who is this voice?
I don't know.
I don't know. That bit's terrible. We're going to cut that out.
We're going to cut it. But I have to ask, is this the moment that we are getting Connor's pick for Best Picture 75?
It is. This is by far the best picture, at least in terms of what was nominated for Best Picture of 1975.
Of the five, out of these five, is officially Connor's pick. We're going to move on. I'm going to say goodbye for a couple minutes. It's been lovely talking to you all. But next up, we are talking about the 1975 movie Jaws, directed by Steven Spielberg. So, we're going to get Steve in here, and we will see you after a quick PSA break.
All right, everybody in the car, let's go.
What are we gonna do first when we get there, Mom? Go for a hike?
Sure.
What about canoeing? Can we go canoeing too?
I don't see why.
How long does it take to get to the forest?
It's not that far, sweetie.
Are we there yet?
Yep, we're here.
Already?
It's a short drive from your neighborhood to your naturehood. Visit discovertheforest.org to find a neighborhood park or green space near you. Brought to you by the Ad Council and the U.S. Forest Service.
I like that your vocal clearing is now in the recording now, because this is a special occasion, Steve. Do you know what it is?
I mean, today's Monday, but what
no,
are you?
You've been on the show before.
Yes, but never.
You've never been in studio.
I'm in studio for the first time.
Yeah, this is a momentous occasion. Steve Herron is sitting where Dan usually sits, across from me.
Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you get my dulcet tones crystal clear.
Yeah.
Because now we're using professional equipment. Hi, I'm Steve Herron. You may know me from Hulkback Mountain, or presenting Best Supporting Actress at the Andes this year. Connor, what are we talking about today?
Today we're talking about, we keep saying 1975, like they're not all from 1975.
Yeah.
We're talking about Steven Spielberg's Jaws. So Dan, I'm so used to Dan. Wow, I'm so used to Dan. I'll just take that back.
No.
So Steve.
Yeah.
I mentioned in the Dog Day section.
Okay.
That, for one, that's my choice for Best Picture.
Mm-hmm.
Are you sharing the same sentiments?
Yeah, the only one of these I'm missing is Cuckoo's Nest, but my pick would probably also be Dog Day. But honestly, with the other four, it's kind of a coin toss. And I would probably just give the edge slightly to Dog Day, though.
Yeah. So this is the Steve Herron official pick for Best Picture 1975.
I would say...
Having not seen Cuckoo's Nest.
Having not seen Cuckoo's Nest, and if today... Monday, April 12th. That is my pick. But if you were to ask me tomorrow, I might give a different answer. Okay. It's just one of those things.
So I asked that because Jaws probably is a close second for you or third, because I know you love Jaws so much.
It's in the mix. For a long time, this was just... I hate saying what my favorite movie is, but when people find out you're really into movies, they always ask you. My go-to answer was Jaws for a long time, just because it's an easy answer to give. I think it's basically a perfect movie. And Jaws is in like the top 10 movies I've seen the most, because I used to watch, I still kind of do, basically every year on the 4th of July.
Yeah. Which, I believe, oh my gosh, every movie on this list, I've only seen it once.
Yeah.
And I saw it on 4th of July a little bit ago.
Yeah.
So, Steve, what happens in Jaws? Because that's Dan's structure. What is Jaws about?
In the fictional town of Amity Island, which is somewhere on the coast of New England, it was actually shot in Martha's Vineyard, so it's basically Martha's Vineyard. There's Amity Island's a small little town. They have a new chief of police, a retired NYPD officer by the name of Brody. He needed to get out of the NYPD because it was New York in the 1970s and he had a family. But he hates the water So he sort of resents the culture of this town and its people, but it's the best gig he could have, and it's a safe town for him to raise his kids. Yeah. And then there's a series of attacks on the water. A series of like dead bodies are showing up, all mangled up, and they think it's a boating accident, but it's very much not a boating accident, Connor. Mm-hmm. To quote Matt Hooper, this was no boating accident. And no, it's a shark. There's a big old shark. I would have a hard time believing there's somebody out here who hasn't seen Jaws, and if they haven't seen Jaws,
it's a big old shark.
It's Jaws.
It's big old shark.
Yeah. It is this omnicultural presence that has like its legacy outweighs almost anything.
Like you mentioned, it's the first blockbuster.
Yeah, it's Jaws and Star Wars and everything that follows.
Yeah, which speaking of this being the first blockbuster, I've told you this story, but for those at home, my dad, when he was my age, actually a little younger, he started working at a movie theater in 1975. Yep. And one of the first big things that came out was Jaws. And he would tell me one of his jobs was to change the marquee every day for the new showtimes. But he'd also, the second they sold out, it was his job to go into the parking lot that was swarmed with people on a megaphone and announce Jaws was sold out.
Yeah.
That was his job.
And it played for basically a year. This was an era, if you had like a mammoth hit, it would just continue playing.
Yeah. That's the first time I mentioned my dad on the show. That's really weird.
What's up, Daryl?
What's up, Daryl? My king. Anyway, I'll just play that for him.
Yeah.
But that was his job. He was change the marquee and then shout when Jaws was done. Yeah. Tickets were sold out. And also he remembers there's a scene in Jaws where we see a dead body underwater. And my dad told me he saw that with, I believe, actually my mom. And she freaked out.
Ben Sherman, what's the name of that guy? Because that guy, the guy who's killed and his head pops out of the boat, when Spielberg was location scouting in Martha's Vineyard, he almost cast that guy as Quint.
Oh, interesting.
And then when they cast Robert Shaw, he told him to follow that guy around. So that guy's featured a lot in the early scenes. The scene where Hooper goes, they're all going to die. When all the locals are trying to hunt the shark, he's the dude in like the Holden Caulfield cap, like shouting out instructions. It's that guy.
That's fun.
Yeah.
No, so Jaws, obviously mentioned, heavily iconic. The first blockbuster.
The first summer blockbuster.
Yeah, the first air quotes blockbuster.
The blockbuster as we know it today. Because there was this, it's kind of insane to imagine now, but the summer used to be the dead season for movies. Like, Dregs got released in the summer because they assumed everyone would want to be outside or they were going on vacation, things, and no one would go in there.
Yeah, you're going to a movie to get air conditioning at this point.
Basically. And Jaws, because it was modeled, its release is very important because its model is like, it's a movie that it's about the 4th of July. We should release it at the summer. And also, it was the first wide release. It was the first movie to be released in over 1,000 theaters, maybe even less, maybe even 400 theaters, like at the same time. This is like just as like multiplexes were starting to be built. But most movie theaters, it was either drive-ins or single-room theaters. This is the first time I was like, no, we are putting this everywhere, and that sort of baked it into, obviously it helps that the audience is really connected with the movie, but they sort of stepped it up. It was like, we're gonna like really make a push for this, and that model is then replicated and it basically defines, well, until coronavirus, how movies are released to this day.
And so we established what we think. What do you think of Jaws? You like the movie?
I think it's basically perfect. It's one of those things where I don't know what there is to say about Jaws. The troubled development and production process of Jaws is so well documented. They didn't have a finished script. Like 6 different writers wrote the U.S. Indianapolis speech. They went like 4 months over schedule. They went insanely over budget. The shark didn't work, this, that, and the other thing. And the fact that the movie not only came out as well as it did, but also then resonated with audiences in the way that it did, I think it's proof that great cinema sometimes is just alchemy. It's the right people in the right place in the right time that put in the right amount of work, and it just kind of worked out.
When I think of Jaws, I think it's a good movie. It's one of those things where I think I just saw it too late in my life, and I saw it with literally knowing that it's an iconic piece of cinema. Yeah. I think because I saw Jaws, like I mentioned, I believe for the first time 2 years ago now, so I was 20. And a 20-year-old seeing Jaws for the first time is not going to have a reaction as like a 10-year-old or 11-year-old seeing Jaws for the first time.
And I saw it for the first time when I was like 4, and then again when I was 13.
Yeah.
And then every year since I've watched it. I think you just have to, the thing is, it was just because it's so iconic, you just have to go in with a mindset. I was like, I'm going to watch a blockbuster. If you go in with a mindset of like, I'm going to watch this like it's a popcorn movie, and then that's when it was like, oh, but it's also the best popcorn movie.
Yeah.
Because like when we think of a popcorn movie today, we think of like Fast and Furious and the Transformers. And I don't want to say they're like these completely shallow things, but this is a popcorn movie that mostly stars like 40-year-olds.
Yeah.
And it's about like, it's just half the movie is just 3 guys on a boat. Like there's no other characters for the second hour of this movie. Not only no other characters, there's no women. It's just 3 dudes and a lot of water.
3 guys being dudes.
And then sometimes a shark shows up.
Exactly, yeah. Which I think that's part of the movie, not the movie's problem for me. It's probably, as I've talked about 1,000 times on this show and with you 1,001 times, where it's just like, I usually lean more towards modern stuff. Mm-hmm. So a lot of the 70s like sensibilities just don't usually line up for me, and I think Jaws is just sadly one of the casualties of that.
Yeah, that's interesting, because I know so many people where Jaws is the oldest movie they will watch. Because yes, there's still a lot of that 70s shagginess, but like because it defined modern sensibilities, it is the oldest quote-unquote new movie.
Yeah.
Which I think is interesting.
I get that.
Yeah, I don't know. It's just one of those movies where it's just like every little moment, every little detail. I love all the townspeople of Amity Island, the one woman who's friends with the mom with the dark brown hair and the deepest tan. Like this is someone who like lives on the beach, who has every bit of bare skin she can expose possible. This movie, I think, has the greatest casting of a married couple I've ever seen. Roy Scheider as Brody and Lorraine Gray as his wife. I look at their chemistry is so magnetic, and they seem to know, like they feel so familiar with each other. I believe they're married more than I believe my parents are married.
Yes. And accompanying their family, their son, who is Michael, right? That's his name?
Michael's the oldest, and then Sean's the little one.
Yeah, the little boy, that like the obviously like iconic dinner scene.
It's the best.
Just, it's great.
And very few modern blockbusters would have a scene like that today.
Yeah.
Just like a minute and a half of like pure silence of just these 2 actors interacting with each other. Yeah. And he and Brody just going, come on and give us a kiss. And the little boy says, why? And he's like, because I need it.
Yeah.
It's such a beautiful human moment. Jaws was one of the very few movies that just like overpassed The Godfather as the highest grossing film of all time. This was back when the highest grossing like film of the year would be a Best Picture nominee a lot of the times, which is not the case anymore. So like The Godfather, I think, just recently established itself as the highest grossing film of all time, and then Jaws like tripled its number, if not more. And it was the movie of the year. It's the movie that everyone in the country saw. Excuse me. It's the movie that everyone in the country saw in a way that just doesn't even exist now. Because like even if we have the MCU and it's this omnicultural thing, my mom hasn't seen a single MCU movie since Thor. So like it's easier now. You have more options to like ignore the big thing if you want to, but there's no avoiding Jaws. And it was very well received. It wasn't just a hit, it was critically well received and was just kind of a sure bet. I don't think anyone was ever going to expect it to win, but it was expected that it was going to get nominated a lot because it was a very well respected movie. In fact, the biggest snub of that entire year is that Spielberg did not get a directing nom. It's the only Best Picture nominee that did not get a directing nom that instead went to Fellini for 𝗲𝗏. And I remember I've seen, like, in the Making of Jaws documentary from, like, the 90s from the Laserdisc that's been repurposed for every release since, there's an interview with Michael Douglas, who was the producer of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. This was back when he was primarily a producer and not an actor. He said it was an outrage that Spielberg got snubbed. Like, and this is the guy who would end up winning the Oscar that year. So the guy who won the Oscar that year for Picture said it's ridiculous that he wasn't nominated.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned the Spielberg snub, because I remember when I was watching Barry Lyndon, and I was like, how did Kubrick get a nom for this? Because how could he not? Mm-hmm. Yeah. And here's the thing, I'm interested in Fellini's 𝗲𝗏.
Yes.
Because I'm curious to see how the heck he did not get nominated for Jaws.
I think it's one of those things where it was like, it was the populist movie. He was the young kid.
Yeah.
He had one theatrically released Goldie Hawn movie before this. Like,
yeah.
They probably thought he was a fluke, and then he followed it up with Close Encounters, and he basically, not to the same extent, but replicated what he did with Jaws in terms of cultural significance and success.
Exactly.
It was only outshadowed by Star Wars.
Because I feel like the Academy now is much more willing, at least from what I've gathered, to give like the 𝗕𝗏 like a nom right out of the gate.
I think it depends on the year, and I think it depends on the 𝗕𝗏. I feel like the prime examples being like Branagh for Henry V, Singleton, who's still the youngest person to be nominated for Best Director. He was 2 years younger than even Spielberg was when Jaws came out. And then the close example I feel like is Damien Chazelle.
Yeah.
But by the time he wins, he's like 32.
Yeah.
So it's rare that someone in that age group even gets to that level.
Yeah. Yeah, because I always feel like PTA did get the nom, but he just didn't.
No.
Yeah. And then Chloe Zhao is older than I think she is, too.
Chloe Zhao, I think, is like pushing 40.
Wow.
I think she's in her late 30s.
But I feel like Chloe Zhao, like someone now who is kind of has that whiz kid status of like, she's been working for, she's 39.
Yeah.
She's been working for a while.
How
but
old's Emerald Fennell, though?
I believe Emerald is about the same age. Because Emerald Fennell has been working as an actress for a long time, 35.
Yeah, so a couple years younger.
Yeah. But even so, with Giselle, like you mentioned, him being the youngest winner, right, at 32.
Yes.
Yeah. So I feel like the Academy is more willing now to give, I guess, more in the acting categories than directing. But they're willing to give, like, the whiz kid, like, a shot out of the gate. When I feel like in the 70s, that sensibility wasn't quite yet there.
And, well, but it was kind of, like, it was much more common in the 70s for acting, like, a really impressive acting debut. They were much more willing to give the nomination then than they are now. The prime example of being Tatum O'Neal.
Yeah.
She was literally 10. She was 8 when she made the movie, and she won.
Yeah. Because Anna Paquin is just a little bit younger than her for the piano, right?
No, she's just a little bit older. She was like a year older.
Okay.
Yeah.
We're getting way off track.
But still.
Yeah, here's the thing. We're talking about the Oscars. It's still, like, semi there.
That's sweet, sweet gold.
That's sweet gold. And yeah, we already kind of talked about the movie's legacy, like what Jaws means now. It's a lot.
It's Jaws.
It's Jaws.
It's crazy that one singular word is so synonymous with an entire sensation, and just like down to like the. I mean, this is a compliment. Like John Williams, one of the most iconic scores of all time. All you really need is 2 notes. You don't even need the full thing, and everyone gets it.
Yeah, you get it right away. And a weird thing I just thought of is there's still weird like Jaws novelty T-shirts at Hot Topic with a cat instead of a shark that says pause. So that's how you know the movie has a legacy.
Yeah. But it's also just like how many other films from 1975 are still being passed down en masse in the way that Jaws is. Like I said, there's so many people I know that like this is the oldest movie they will watch.
Yeah. Like we mentioned with Dog Day a little earlier, a movie that is more deserving of a humongous legacy that just doesn't really have one. Well, that concludes our section on Jaws.
Yeah, good movie. You should watch it if you haven't seen it.
So I'm going to dip out now, and you and Dan are going to take a journey down south to Nashville.
Yeah.
Okay. And then I'm going to snap, and then when I snap, Dan will be here like magic. Ready? 3, 2.
All right, and welcome back to Film and. I'm happy to be back in the studio, and this time we have now kind of reached the third section of this episode. I'm here with Steve. Steve, thank you so much for being here.
Hi, everyone. It's Steve Herron. You may know me from the Hulkback Mountain episode or presenting Best Supporting Actress at the Andes this year.
Amazing.
Or you may know me from Jaws, which you've heard 2 minutes ago.
But yeah, we are talking about the 1975 film Nashville, directed by Robert Altman.
Yes.
You and I, we just watched this. We watched your DVD copy.
We watched it about 2 weeks ago.
About 2 weeks ago. So we've had some time to sit on it.
Because we've had some major production delays on this episode.
Indeed we have. But it is, as of now, one of my most memorable movie watches of the semester period.
Yeah.
It was a really just interesting watch. I enjoyed kind of being able to analyze it under the context of this episode, and I'm happy we're able to talk about it. So I guess, Steve, do you want to give like a summary of Nashville a little bit?
Nashville is an ensemble comedy. I'm gonna say comedy.
Ensemble-y?
Featuring 24, count 'em, 24 different characters in and around Nashville. They don't. It's supposed to be 1976. The film came out in 75, but it's supposed to be 76 because it's both an election year and it's supposed to be the bicentennial of the United States. So around summer, possibly 4th of July of 1976.
Yeah, a hot weekend
Over
in
the course
Nashville.
of a weekend, like a Monday. It's like a Friday to a Monday, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I think the final scene is a Monday.
Yeah, because
like
the rally. They say it's Monday.
Yeah.
And there's been 2 nightfalls, so I think it's like
Friday afternoon,
Yeah.
everyone showing up on the plane and stuff, and then to the end.
Yeah, and it's about all these different characters from different sects of life. The central theme is country music. It's about how country music connects people, the chase for fame. It's basically about America. Nashville as like sort of this catalyst that we can view as a representation of American culture, both in terms of the arts, politics.
Yeah, this
what
really
have you.
interesting melting pot in the literal area we call Middle America.
Yeah.
And how also this area is so defined by the music industry.
Yeah.
And how music is a big part of, I think, everyone's lives coming into this movie, which is really cool.
Especially because, like, I was reading the Pauline Kael review of this before while you guys were recording Dog Day, and she talks about a lot of different things about how the American South, while being part of the country at large, sort of has a culture of its own, and that roots to the Civil War, a sort of conquered people, what have you, and they sort of hold their pride and like a culture inside of another culture, and it's all about being down on your luck, poverty, a poverty that was baked into salting fields and reparations from the Union, et cetera, et cetera, and also how Nashville in of itself is like a Hollywood of its own. It's like it is this cultural hub that affects a large portion of the country that is mostly ignored by the other portion.
Yeah. And I do find this like Nashville, the way Robert Altman presents the city of Nashville feels like it is a liminal space, really, where you have all these different things clashing.
Yeah.
And I think this kind of works so perfectly into the Altman style of like just his aesthetic, overlapping dialogue, heavy ensemble cast, kind of fly on the wall, looking at these moments of life with these people.
I feel like a lot of people would make this argument. If it's not the best Robert Altman movie, it's the most Robert Altman movie. I think this is kind of his ultimate statement as an artist.
Yeah. It's honestly a difficult tie for me between this and McCabe and Miss Miller. Yeah. But and
of course his masterpiece, 1980's Popeye, starring Robert Williams and Shelley Duvall.
Good point.
And I'm not joking when I say that.
That's a non-ironic statement.
I adore Popeye, which is McCabe and Miss Miller, but it's also a musical with songs by Harry Nilsson for children.
Yes. By Robert Altman.
Yes.
Amazing. But yeah, I'm sure you figured out at this point, this is a heavily musical film.
Yes.
And I think seeing a film like this at the scale it is at, I mean, coming from where Robert Altman is and doing this deep dive into not just the music industry, but incorporating music into a cinematic experience that isn't just needle drops or something else. You have the literal creation of music, the experience of live music.
To the extent where a lot of the songs are written by the actors playing the characters, written from the perspective of their characters.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like Keith Carradine wrote pretty much all of his own songs.
Yeah, a lot of cool method stuff, basically.
Yeah. I mean, and it helps that, with a few exceptions, most of the songs are legitimately good.
Yeah.
It is not like, obviously Nashville is an inherently satirical film.
Yeah.
But it's the songs themselves are rarely the joke, with the exception of our main sort of Roy Rogers friend. Who we must stay together for the sake of the children. I think and we must be doing something right to last 200 years. These sort of like jingoistic, like a cartoonish version of a country singer, of that old school style of country singer. Yeah. But for the most part, the songs are presented with a level of sincerity.
Yeah. And I think where the comedy comes in is really just the interactions and relationships of how all these kind of disparate people end up just kind of smashing into each other in these public places.
In the few moments where a low status person clashes the high status person, like our friend who we follow throughout the film, who is trying to leave her like terrible abusive husband to become a country singer, and we never hear her until the end when we very much hear her sing. But that one when she sneaks backstage into the Opry and she runs into Karen Black and our 𝗕ble 𝗍𝗆 friend that I mentioned earlier, and them just like having no idea what to do with this woman whatsoever.
It's like, no, we can't let you. It's like,
you write your own songs. That's very nice. That's very, very nice.
And I think what I really like is that when it just comes to discussing music, it is not just this sunshiny look at the idea of country music. I mean, as a fan, I'm not a fan of country music usually, but I find myself enjoying the songs in this and the artistic expressions that Altman is able to capture in this. But it's not just this celebration of music. It's in many ways like it's a mirror, or it's a mirror, but also a window. It's like a two-way mirror that's looking into the industry and how it can just kind of chew some people up and spit them out. And how it might elevate others and keep others down. You know?
I think it's epitomized best by the sort of like, there are a number of songs that are throughout the film, and some of them repeat. But the main sort of anthem of the film is "It Don't Worry Me," which on the album, the soundtrack to the album, is sung by 𝗕𝗃 𝗏, but it's sung by a number of characters throughout the film. And the line "It Don't Worry Me" is sort of a double-edged sword. It's like either life is hopeless, so why even bother caring? Or it's just like there's always a greater opportunity tomorrow. So even if my troubles are getting me down today, there's always tomorrow.
It's equally optimistic and nihilistic.
Yes.
Which is a really perfect place to like kind of leave the story up to interpretation for a lot of people.
And I imagine, I know you don't like to spoil things on the show, so we don't have to go into detail about the ending. But the ending, what Altman is trying to say with the ending, I think openly leaves a lot of room for interpretation in general.
Which I think is one of the reasons I love this movie.
I think the ending is brilliant. I think it's one of the all-time great endings.
It is, yeah. I had an episode just last week, 8 movie endings that subvert audience expectations. This one was on the short list. It didn't make it, but boy, did I want to talk about it. This and One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest in many ways. So
no, because it's funny because like I watched this for the first time when I was in high school, and then I revisited with you, Dan, a couple weeks ago. And then about last week, Connor and my other roommate Clay were watching it to prep for this week's episode. So I would come in and catch scenes with them, and there sort of was like, what is this like leading to? What is that leading to? And I'm like, the thing you have to know about Nashville is that it's basically plotless until there is so much plot, and it's all right at the end. And it's shocking. Like, it should not tie together as cleanly as it does.
Yeah, I mean, having so many people, you just realize that it's all been developing for this kind of final scene where you see it makes so much sense where everyone is based. This is the kind of the scene is a final rally for 𝗷 Walker, the replacement party candidate.
Nashville is essentially, you put a pot of water on a boiler to make some pasta. And you have that sort of foam. You put your pasta in, you're trying to cook your pasta. And the foam, these individual little bubbles are like kind of building up in the top. That's from the starch of the pasta. And you don't think they really have anything to do. They're just a bunch of little bubbles. And it keeps rising and rising and rising and rising and rising until all those bubbles are about to boil over. That's basically the structure of Nashville. It's a bunch of individual little moments that are clashing into each other more than you think they are until they finally build into something greater, something potentially very destructive.
Exactly. And I think it's so interesting because I think a lot of people, you can kind of see this as a very almost jubilant film throughout, but I think I take it more as just a very exuberant film because in many ways Altman is trying to capture like the absolute overactivity of everything.
It's brimming with like life and entropy.
Yes. And like showmanship. There's so much showmanship in what everyone does and what everyone's trying to achieve. Even for like people who are trying to do things in the background. So I guess to go, a bit deeper into this Nashville well, which I could literally dip into forever, you have some really interesting early casting choices. You know, you have Jeff Goldblum as this silent biker character.
In like his third role ever, I think.
Very early. If you're coming to this movie for Jeff Goldblum, you might be a bit disappointed.
I mean, his stuff is great.
His stuff is great.
His look is incredible. He's entirely silent. He's on like a trike, like a motorcycle trike. I think he's credited as Tricycle Man. He has this insane wide brim hat, these huge glasses, and he's just doing sleight of hand magic in the background of a lot of scenes. He's doing a lot of Goldblum-y things.
Yeah, and it's interesting for me to look back and be like, man, he was Goldbluming before anyone even knew what that was yet.
He's always been Goldbluming.
He's always been Goldbluming. I love that. You have Shelley Duvall as this really interesting, like, kind of groupie character.
L.A. Joan.
L.A. Joan.
What's her real name? Is it Martha?
Yeah, I think so. Coming in and kind of, in many ways, just being an observer, but kind of a piggybacker on all these experiences.
And she's sort of hopping from scene to scene to scene. She has a different look in almost every scene. Like, when we first see her, she has these it's just like a series of wigs. She has these curls. Another scene, she has pigtails. Another scene, she has this massive afro.
Yeah. Oh, my goodness. Which is a huge contrast to her very skinny frame.
Yeah.
And I guess what interests me so much is I was doing research for this episode and I found the trailer to Nashville.
Yeah.
Where it just goes through how every single one of the 24 stories is connected in one thread.
Yeah.
Without really spoiling anything crazy, but perfectly describing what everyone is. That must be one of the most impressive trailers ever.
Yeah.
Like, someone give the guy who made that trailer an award. That was amazing, being able to encapsulate Nashville in 2.5 minutes.
Because they're all these characters intersect with each other in different ways, but there is at least one direct connection between them.
Yeah.
Because here's the thing, there's 24 characters total, but you can probably divide them up into 6 sort of subgroups.
Yeah.
You have your established singers, you have your political people.
Yeah.
And you have your people who want to make it. You're sort of underground. I want to be a star.
And then you have
some ancillary people that connect.
Yeah, you have your Scott Glenn characters.
Yeah.
Who are just on the periphery.
Yeah.
Who don't really do anything.
Who is constantly watching Barbara Jean, but he's also connecting with the guy in the hospital whose wife is in the next room over, who's the uncle of Shelley Duvall.
Shelley Duvall, who comes in with the guy who rents the room from her uncle.
Who's carrying the case everywhere.
Yeah. Oh, my goodness.
Yeah.
It's very... It's labyrinthine in so few words.
And it's one of those things, it's what Altman does so brilliantly. He sort of presents you Pauline Kael said in her review, he's a very atmospheric director.
Yeah.
And he sort of presents you these moments and these ideas, and you sort of just have to let them wash over you. And at the end, you realize, oh, he planted this and that and that. It's not the entire movie isn't just a happening.
Yeah.
He's setting up all these different things that is going to culminate into a point. For the meantime, this is just a weekend. Everyone's living their life.
I find that so commendable.
Yeah.
And he was part of the Best Director race.
Yeah,
correct?
Connor and I were talking about it.
And
all the nominees except for Spielberg.
Yeah. And another really interesting point is, I guess, what do you see as kind of not only the family dynamic of this film, but the community dynamic? Because I feel like the only family we see is
the 𝗕ble guy and his son, and also
and the deaf.
The deaf children.
The deaf children.
And Shelley Duvall with her aunt and uncle. There's smaller sort of families, but it's a film mostly about individuals.
Yeah, which is so interesting because at the end of the day, it's such a communal piece.
Yeah.
Even when you have really, I think, chaotic characters the BBC reporter coming in and just shoving a microphone in people's faces, and you're kind of unsure, is she even getting a story anymore?
No, it's funny. It's I'm making this documentary, but you never see her with a cameraman.
Yeah.
She has a cameraman in the first scene that she quickly loses in the car crash, which is another scene where pretty much every character intersects
is caught in the highway. Yeah.
Which is this beautiful metaphor for the entire film.
Yeah.
But after she loses, we never see her with the cameraman again. She's just carrying a microphone and a tape recorder. I'm I don't know if this is a documentary anymore. I think you've essentially invented a podcast, but
yeah.
And I think Geraldine Chaplin's character is just sort of Altman commenting on himself as an outsider, sort of peering in.
Yeah.
I also think it's the weakest part of the film.
Agreed.
Yeah. But there's some interesting moments, and she represents some interesting dynamics. How she connects with other characters is interesting. It ties things up well.
Yeah. if we want to look at another kind of roving set piece of the movie, the 𝗕𝗿 𝗙 van, which you just see driving around and spouting these mantras of like, does Christmas smell like oranges to you? And it's like, there's 535 people in the House of Representatives, and like 60% of them are lawyers.
And
you know,
he wants
like,
to get rid of all lawyers.
Exactly, like the replacement party. And it's kind of like, I love Altman's take on this kind of idea of this looming political presence that's kind of weaving its way into the year 1976. And I love how he captures that in 1975. That is, like, it's mind-boggling, because you look at like the bicentennial year is a very like really interesting political year, I guess, in American history.
Yeah, because like I feel like the other ultimate bicentennial year movie is Dazed and Confused.
Yeah,
which is a almost 20 years later reaction to that moment.
Yeah.
And it comes at it from a much more nostalgic perspective, and also just like there's a lot more distance there. Whereas Altman was right in the thick of it, and he's essentially was like, in this upcoming very sort of cornerstone year, we are going to be reflecting not only on our entire history, but pretty much the entire previous decade. Which you have the decline of the Vietnam War, Watergate, the assassination of Martin Luther King and Robert Kennedy, all these different things sort of culminating.
Yeah.
And I think 𝗕𝗿 𝗙 represents the growing cynicism amongst common people, which is why it's the replacement party. It's just like, obviously things are broken. Can we start from scratch? And obviously that didn't happen, because that would take way too much work, and us Americans don't like reformatting things if it technically, quote-unquote, works.
Yeah.
But he's like, 𝗕𝗿 𝗙 is like, you listen to him, and I feel like most people would probably agree with what he has to say.
Yeah.
Until he says one thing that's like, I don't know where that came from.
Yeah, and you're just like, what?
Yeah.
Like,
but yeah,
you ask a lawyer of the time, I bet he told you how a watch is made. And I'm like, yeah.
But it's like, I think the movie says a lot that it ends with a political rally. A political rally for a faceless sort of political movement. Because we never see 𝗕𝗿 𝗙. We only hear him. And none of his posters have his face on it. It's just like a tree that has like roots and stuff.
Yeah, like bringing roots back into America, basically.
Which I feel like the South kind of wanted to, because Pauline Kael said this in a review, they are longing for a culture that they never even fully had.
Yeah.
Because like the Confederacy only lasted like 4 years.
Yeah.
And also it's in front of the Nashville Parthenon, which is a replica of the Greek Parthenon, one of the cornerstones of democracy. So a cornerstone symbol of democracy.
It's Robert Altman in those final moments just absolutely ringing home this idea of what we consider the American political dream. Yeah. And again,
and does it even work to begin with?
Exactly. You know, just leaving it so open-ended as like looking forward into the future, we don't know where this is going. Yeah. So I guess we're gonna cut it off here, folks. Thank you guys for listening. We're gonna cut off real quick. If you've been listening, thank you so much. Of course, I'm gonna plug Connor's Letterboxd, Cranberry 18. We have a list for all the Film Man movies we talk about on the radio show. Of course, thank you so much, Steve Heron, for coming on. Would you like to plug anything?
Yeah, my Letterboxd is Steve like bird. It's the name Steve, the word like, and the word bird.
All right, and the bird is word. So we will see you guys next week. We're going to continue on Nashville talk now, but you will hear us coming back next week. So have a lovely year. See ya. Hey guys. Welcome back to Film Man. You might notice that Connor is not doing the intro. It's because we are still deep in the pit of Nashville, the 1975 Altman film, and that means we are talking about Best Picture.
1975. We're in the thick of it.
The thick of it. The thickest of it. We are pretty much at the halfway point, and I'm here with Steve Heron. Steve, thank you so much for being here.
Hi, everyone. It's Steve Heron. You may know me from the Hulkback Mountain episode. Hi, everyone. It's Steve Heron. You may know me from the Hulkback Mountain episode or presenting Best Supporting Actress at the Andes this year. Daniel, thank you so much for having me back.
Thanks for being here.
In studio.
Yeah, we're always happy to have you in the studio. This is a very special treat. So I guess we can move on.
Yeah.
And talk about, I guess, just what does this mean that this was one of the 5 that was nominated for Best Picture?
Well, I think to give it some context, I mentioned the Pauline Kael review that I was reading during the last part. Something I learned in that review that I never knew before is that the film was originally going to be made by United Artists. It was financed by United Artists. It was built within that studio system. Yeah. And then halfway through production, United Artists was like, "This is insanity. We cannot release this. This isn't a movie. It's a series of like vignettes that like barely." And they cut funding like halfway through the movie. Yeah. So halfway through the movie, Robert Altman had to independently finance the film himself. Yeah. Probably with a lot of his MASH profits and things like that.
And it was Pauline Kael who was one of the big supporters of this film, correct?
He when he was sort of entering the final mixing phases, the film was unfinished. He screened it for 12 people in New York. Pauline Kael being one of them, a very important insider in the film release community. And it was her and other people championing of the film. Actually, I believe at that point Paramount had already bought it. Like Paramount had once Robert Altman had finished it, Paramount had bought it from him, but they didn't have a release date slated at all. But it was that early buzz from those handful of people. It was like, no, this is a very important, very interesting film.
Yeah. So it was a lot of those film critic insiders who were able to elevate this to the point where the Academy noticed it. Yeah.
Well, just in general, because I don't think the film was a flop. I don't think it was a massive hit, but it definitely. It made an impact because MASH was one of those surprise mega hits.
Yeah, I mean, we got an iconic TV show out of a hit movie.
Yes, and it was MASH was kind of the countercultural film that crossed into the mainstream in a way that even Easy Rider didn't. Because it was a comedy, it was slightly more palatable.
And for reference, Nashville, off a budget of $2.2 million, and ended up grossing $10 million total.
It was a modest sized hit. It turned a profit and things like that in a way that a nearly 3-hour long satire of American living you would never expect to. But also that just shows that the 70s were just such a strange time for film and culture in general.
Yeah, I mean you have the Hollywood Renaissance. Yeah. Basically, you have a lot of these more. I look at the 70s and I see a lot of American directors being given a lot of creative license that they wouldn't have gotten 10 years earlier.
I think the United Artists pulling out their funding was kind of a blessing in disguise. And it was well, at this point I can really just make whatever I want because I'm burning my own and friends' money. There's no oversight at all. Yeah. So I'm going to make this insane documentary-esque labyrinthine gumbo of American culture.
Gumbo.
Not to mix my Southern, because that's more of a New Orleans thing, but still.
But yeah, Altman's kind of way he went about making this film is so informative of what the film is about. And I think that's just what's so magical about this. Because to be honest, I look back at this film just 2 weeks later very fondly. And this is one that's going to stick in my head for a while. And I hesitate to pull this out now, but I'm going to say this would tie in my book for Best Picture 75. This is the first of two picks. And I think we're not telling it.
I'm not going to say it.
I'm not going to say it, but this is the first. And we'll get to the second eventually. But yeah, so I guess when we're talking legacy of Nashville, obviously I don't think it's something that's been elevated in the mainstream in any sense. I think this is definitely a bit more of a niche watch for some.
For our generation, yes. I think it's a film so of its moment that older people, I feel like the films are not passed down the way that they used to be from teacher to student, parent to child. And also with the internet, it's so easy to like sort of find your own pocket.
Yeah.
It is still sort of withheld as like one of the great American films of the 70s.
Yeah.
And I do think like even more so than something like MASH or McCabe and Mrs. Miller, I think this is the defining film of Robert Altman's career.
And I look back and I'm so happy that this is the one, you know, that this is a statement we can look back, because at the end of the day, this is a Best Picture nominee. This is, I think, the Academy in many ways recognizing, in what I said also when I was talking about Dog Day, recognizing films that capture the state of the American people. And the sentiment, but in a very different way.
But not only that,
Day.
sort of to build off your point, like this is like Best Picture lineups can be, you know, fairly similar. It's a lot of similar types of movies, but this is a very diverse slate. Less so now with the 10, because with the 10 they feel more willing. It's like, all right, let's get an animated in there, let's get an oddball in there, let's get a smaller indie drama. But like if you were to look at the 10 nominees, it's like a terse thriller that is also a character study. The ultimate popcorn movie that is just so tightly made and edited and directed and written, considering how disastrous that production was. Nashville, just being Nashville.
Being Nashville.
A painterly period drama satire and a dissection of the failures of the mental health system within the United States.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, a very somewhat... a darker look, a darker slate for the Academy.
But that was also the 70s.
It was also the 70s.
What else was there to do?
Very dirty, weird, somewhat bleak, burnt out decade.
Everyone, like, not to, unfortunately, I am not that much of a fan of Louis C.K., but he talked about, it was like, when I was a kid, I watched the president say I quit on television, crying, and then he got in a helicopter and flew away. Like, I don't know how better to describe the insanity that was the 1970s. Everyone saw the president weeping, saying I was accused of something that he definitely did, but was denying it entirely. Crying on television, saying my mother was a saint, saying I quit, and then getting on a helicopter and flying away.
Yeah.
The leader of the free world.
Yeah, and then you have Jeff Goldblum on his trike motorcycle.
Doing sleight of hand magic.
Doing sleight of hand magic.
Yeah.
That's the final act. Yeah. There are so many iconic images in Nashville that I won't get out of my head for quite a while.
Yeah.
You know, it's really special.
Yeah.
I might honestly just rewatch it soon.
It's a very good movie.
Quite soon. It's
very, 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 very good movie.
Very good movie.
Yeah.
It's tied for my BP 75 pick. So
I would also, it's just like, I think of all the films, this is the one that is most of its year. It's the most of its time. It's the most Robert Altman. I think it is also the most 1975.
Yes, for sure. And yeah, I guess that kind of wraps things up.
Yeah.
It's been very nice talking to you, Steve.
Dan, I always love talking to you.
I guess
look into those baby blues.
Oh gosh.
Talking some Robert Altman.
Robert Altman. Heck yeah. Yeah, I guess I'll get Connor back in here. Next up, folks, after a quick PSA break, we're going to end up talking about the 1975 movie Barry Lyndon. See you soon.
Running late to class but still need that morning caffeine or hot breakfast to start your day out right? Download the Bite app by Sodexo and place your custom order for fast, easy pickup at Zyme. Open 8:30 a.m. to 3 o'clock p.m. Mondays through Fridays.
Mommy makes me munch my M&Ms.
Dan's going to put that at the beginning of the episode. You know that already.
I'm for it.
Okay.
Let's rock and roll.
Okay, guys, welcome back. I'm sitting in the chair again.
Yeah, we played musical chairs once again. And for those who don't know, it's me, Steve Herron. You may know me from the Hookback Mountain episode or presenting Best Supporting Actress at this year's Andes.
In case you're just watching part 2 and not part 1.
Yeah.
Okay. So, Steve.
Yeah.
Today we're talking about 1975's Barry Lyndon.
Yes.
Directed by Stanley Kubrick.
Indeed. Yes. Very much so.
That's what we're doing.
Is this... to start out very casually before we get more formal, I know this is kind of a terse, vague statement. Is this the most Kubrick?
Up there for sure,
I would think it's up there.
Yeah. It's
this
up there.
weird, distant, painterly satire
Yeah.
that's about nothing and everything.
Yeah.
I think this. I mean, there's a lot of arguments to be made for 2001. Maybe Eyes Wide Shut. I would put this as a contender for the most Kubrick.
It's very Kubrickian.
Yes.
But yeah. What happened in Barry Lyndon, Steve?
What, Connor? A whole life happened in Barry Lyndon. Redmond Barry goes from being an Irish lad of some note to being cuckolded by his cousin. He then believes that he kills her fiance. Turns out he wasn't. He was framed. But he was still ran away into the British military to escape a murder he didn't even commit.
Yes.
And then when he finds out he didn't actually commit that murder, he becomes a deserter, flees to Hungary. They found out he's a deserter. Now he is a prisoner soldier for them, is able to use that Hungarian military experience to become a spy on a fellow Irishman, who then they work into cahoots to get Barry into freedom so they can scam people together. And then he cuckolds some old rich guy, steals his wife and his kids, steals his entire life, steals his last name. That's how he gets the name Barry Lyndon, and then continues to suck her dry for her wealth as he continues to cheat on her until her son has had enough, and then is able to defeat him and get him out of the family.
Yeah.
It is a tragedy of success, if you will.
Yes. A man failing upwards.
Yes. Continually failing upwards, that even when he reaches his ultimate failure, he's still kind of okay.
Yeah. He's still doing pretty okay for himself. Yeah. He still gets an allowance of 50.
I think it's $5,000 a year.
Yeah,
but
pretty
like
much.
But
in old school money.
But in the 18th century.
Sure.
Essentially, a man, an Irish guy, is a trickster and a thief, and he scams his way upward. That's what happens.
Dan's not going to cut that out. Dan's going to have the entire thing in there.
Well, here's the thing. He'll cut that out for the radio edit.
That's true.
Yeah.
Yeah, Barry Lyndon did the first hour and a half did so much for me. Mm-hmm. And the second hour and a half just did so little for me.
I love this movie all the way through.
With the exception of the duel scene at the end, the second half really doesn't work for me that well.
Yeah.
The duel scene, and what is the kid's name?
Lord Bullington.
Yeah, and him like spanking Lord Bullington at the piano recital. Yeah. Those are like just great scenes.
Yeah, it's about class structure, and it starts in Ireland and ends in all throughout Europe, but it's about class structure in like 18th century. The bougiest of the bougie.
Yeah, the bourgeoisie.
The bourgeoisie, exactly.
Bourgeoisie.
Specifically in England, in and around England.
Yeah. Some good candlelight scenes. Not enough for being known as the candlelight movie.
Yeah, it's mostly sunshine. There's not a lot of scenes, which I can't. That must be a nightmare to shoot. Yeah. No, that's one of here's the thing. Like Kubrick, one of the most obsessive, detail-oriented filmmakers of all time. The one, if you have to point out a Persian flaw, it's that the continuity of the candles are all over the place when you have shot reverse shot, because you just can't.
You just can't
replicate it.
Those fancy 3-wick candles, so they're bright enough.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we kind of already touched what we think. I think the movie is pretty strong in the first half, pretty okay in the second, with the exception of a few scenes. And like you mentioned, you like it all the way through.
I think it's brilliant all the way through. I have not seen every Kubrick movie, but of the ones I've seen, this is my second favorite, if not my favorite. It's this and Dr. Strangelove for me. I like Kubrick best when he's a satirist, and I think this is a brilliant, brilliant satire of not only class, but perceptions of masculinity and femininity.
Mm-hmm. I guess that's just in general. Our thoughts are pretty cut and dry. Then there's not really much to go into, our thoughts on Barry Lyndon.
Oh, I can go deep.
Then go deep.
I can go deep.
I don't have much to say.
Okay, sadly. I want to start the crux of my argument basically surrounds Ryan O'Neal. After watching Barry Lyndon, I've been watching a lot of Ryan O'Neal. Ryan O'Neal is not a great actor, but can be very well cast. And I think what Kubrick sort of honed into in this, and I think Bogdanovich used him far better in Paper Moon than in What's Up, Doc, is that Ryan O'Neal is inherently untrustworthy. There's something dead in his eyes, and he's too pretty, but he's also just kind of boring, that he must be up to something. There is nothing inherently pure about Ryan O'Neal. He is shifty and untrustworthy, and he's brilliant at playing con men, specifically in Paper Moon and in Barry Lyndon. Barry Lyndon, a much more sort of gentle con man, and Paper Moon, he's swindling poor people during the Depression out of their money for Bibles that they never bought. I think Barry Lyndon brilliantly uses Ryan O'Neal, even though on the surface he's terribly miscast because his Irish accent is atrocious. This movie is filled with terrible Irish accents, with the exception of like the 3 actual actors who are Irish. I think what's very interesting is that the story of Barry Lyndon, which in the original novel is told entirely from his perspective, Kubrick inserts this sort of godlike narrator that's telling us what's happening, all these details that are missing, is about the pitfalls that are inherent with pride, specifically in how one perceives their own worth based in masculinity. Every action that a man takes in this movie is to prove his own self-worth to another man. The film begins with Barry's father being killed in a duel, an act that in today's standard, like the way masculinity was perceived then versus the way masculinity is perceived now. We look back on this time, the 18th century, as a time where men were really men. The duel is this gentleman's sort of game, when in reality it's like the most dumb, brutish thing in the world. It's 2 guys standing in a field pointing guns at each other and repeatedly firing until one of them dies. It's beyond ridiculous, but no. There are rules. There are boundaries. It was a gentleman's game. Mm-hmm. The inherent absurdity within that. And, like, Barry's whole, like, sort of the causing action of this entire movie is Barry believing that he's been cuckolded, that a woman that he has yearned for his entire life has upended him and chose another man, and that man must pay. And then once the circumstances of that man paying comes out, you see, oh, this is a boy. This is a child. He has no idea what he's doing. And he runs away, and he takes his mommy's money, and then he's held up, and he has to join the army as a way to, like prove his manhood again. He's constantly trying to prove something that no one is really asking from him, with the exception of the cousin, the beginning that he yearned for, was like, you didn't step up. I had to choose someone else. So this entire film is him trying to prove his masculinity to one person that he'll never see again. And proving it to himself. And the entire time it was like, how do I prove my masculinity? By emasculating other men.
Yeah.
Until he finally lands on Charles Lyndon, where he's just like, you're on the way out. So he takes the coward's route. Like, I'm going to steal your girl when you're already dying, and you have no way of defending yourself. And Charles Lyndon has the very interesting line. It's like, I'd rather be known as a cuckold than a fool. Like his masculinity is based on the pride of knowing what you're doing to me, and I can see right through you when everyone else is falling for the game. Can you say cuckold on the radio?
Here's the thing. I think
Okay.
That was Dan from Out to the Studio telling us we can.
Yeah.
Because I think the 4-letter version of that is maybe more dicey.
Yeah.
But just the
the act of cuckolding.
The old English
sense.
definition of he is a cuckold.
Yes.
I think you are fine to say.
Yeah.
I think Dan's probably done the research why he's so sure that we can say cuckold on the radio.
I want to make sure that we didn't get several FCC violations.
No, I think cuckold's fine. I think we said the 4-letter version might be a little more dicey.
Yeah.
But I think cuckold is fine.
Yeah. And then Barry inserts himself into this other family's life, taking this other man's name to make himself seem more manly. And this entire time, he is trying to downgrade and sort of gaslight the self-worth of a literal child, because the child's a lord. And technically, this kid has more power and more like social caveat than he has.
Like if they mention if his wife dies, he gets nothing.
He gets nothing.
Since he's not royalty, technically.
Yeah. So he needs to make sure that he is completely dominating himself over this woman's life to gain any sort of social clout.
Yeah.
And the kid, who again is 12, sees through him because in a lot of ways they're on the same level.
Yes.
Barry is still a little boy. And this little boy, who is more adult than Barry will ever be, now has to play the game because now he's technically his father.
Yes.
And like Bullington's whole motivation is that he is so Bullington is kind of represented as sort of a Freudian figure, but he is so enraptured and in love and deeply caring for his mother and doesn't like seeing his mother being manipulated. And also, when he tries to stand his ground, when Bullington, as a 12-year-old boy, tries to prove his manhood, Barry spanks him, thereby emasculating him. Yeah. And that defines Bullington's entire character until they meet again in his like mid to late 20s.
Mm-hmm.
Not even that. I think Bullington's supposed to be like 18.
Here's the thing. This might be me reaching into things, just talking about like masculinity and stuff.
Yeah.
Is him firing his gun early a metaphor?
I think
Okay.
absolutely. I think
Okay.
absolutely.
I didn't think
But
about that until now.
Not even in like, yes, in the sexual sense, that's sort of a built-in imagery, but also just a representative as like, this is again a boy who is trying to prove himself as a big, strong man, but this is like a deadly child's game essentially.
Yes. Yeah. Because when he does, his gun fires early, and then Barry.
Yeah.
Like one time he's actually like merciful in the entire movie. He fires him to the ground as well.
Because Barry, because again, in a lot of ways they're on the same level. It's like Barry is like, I get it. You feel like you need to prove yourself. I've sort of run havoc on your entire life.
Yeah.
I'm going to let you have this. Even though you technically didn't earn it, and I could kill you on sight, you've earned my respect because I get where you're coming from now.
Yeah. So you think it went as far that Barry was going to let him shoot him?
Barry purposely shoots to the side.
I know he shoots to the side.
Yeah.
I took that as like an act of like mercy.
Yeah.
Not actively. I think Barry was expecting him to stop.
Yes. I think so as well. I don't think Barry was going to let him shoot him, but it was like this is Barry making the statement. It was like, I'm going to be the quote unquote bigger man.
Yeah.
I'm going to let you have this. And then Bullington's like, okay, bet.
Yeah. So
And then
even
fires
his
again.
act of mercy
is
even still him trying to be bigger than him.
Yes.
Interesting. I didn't take it that way at first, but I did get that now for sure. Interesting. Here's the thing. I'm glad I'm talking to you about Barry Lyndon. Because this is all stuff that I realized just didn't really work for me. But you explaining it to me makes me like Barry Lyndon more.
Yeah, it's a good movie.
Here, I own the movie.
Yeah.
Because it went off Netflix the day after I was going to watch it.
Yeah.
So day before I was going to watch it, I guess I should say. So now I own Barry Lyndon. Yeah. So I'll for sure watch it a couple more times.
This is something I'm very excited to get in the Criterion sale this upcoming July.
Oh, yeah, that's true. I wish it gets Criterion.
Yeah. And yeah, again, this is like I a lot of times Kubrick is I haven't seen his entire filmography, but Kubrick is far from my favorite filmmaker. But like the ones I really connect to is the one when he's being a satirist.
Yeah.
When he's inherently was like, all right, because his films can be so emotionally distant. I like him best was like, all right, let's analytically dissect the human condition, rather than just these grand sweeping sort of epics. It was like, look at the scope of this.
Yeah.
That often I think can be unfeeling, whereas there are times where it's just like that sort of level of coldness, but actively trying to break people down like they're a jigsaw puzzle, I find to be when his films resonate with me most.
Interesting. I need to watch a lot more of Kubrick. I've only seen my third one. I've only seen Shining, Full Metal Jacket, and now this.
Yeah.
And none of them work for me. So I'm excited to try Eyes Wide Shut's one of the most excited for. Yeah. But Eyes Wide Shut, Strange Love.
Yeah, I love Dr. Strangelove.
Yeah. The funny thing is, I mentioned this to you a couple days ago when we talked about this. I own a majority of his filmography. I just haven't seen them.
He's hard to. It's one of those things where it feels like homework.
Yeah.
Whereas I went into Barry Lyndon and was like, all right, this is gonna be a little bit of homework, and I was shocked just how instantly I was sucked into this narrative.
And you remember I was actively dreading starring Barry Lyndon.
Yeah.
Because my other two experiences only Full Metal Jacket and Shining.
But it's just like the nice thing about it is like, yes, it's the 3-hour-long Painter movie, a Painter Lee movie.
Yes,
it's the Candlelight movie. But it's like two there's an epilogue right in the middle. It's two 90-minute chunks.
Yeah,
and I think if you approach it on that, it's a far more approachable film. Yeah. It's because it's very two distinct halves. This is the quote unquote rise of Barry Lyndon, and this is the quote unquote fall of Barry Lyndon. The ironic thing is that during the rise of Barry Lyndon, he's constantly falling, and during his fall, he's continually rising.
Yeah. No, and I will say that, like, despite it being 3 hours long and very painfully, it does fly. Yeah. This movie does have a very brisk pace, especially in the first 90 minutes.
Yeah, especially because like the amount of ground you cover in those 3 hours. Yeah. It's like a nearly 30-year period.
Yeah. How do you think it got to the Oscars? How do you think was Barry's journey failing upwards to the Academy Awards?
It's one of those things where Kubrick's reputation has always been mixed. And Barry Lyndon especially, like this, there are films where a Kubrick film comes out and there are always people who will instantly say, this is brilliant. And then there are always people who say, this is hackery. And then sort of as people go on, I feel like Kubrick's, obviously because he's so detail-oriented, these are films that people get more and more out of the more and more they watch them. So as the longer they've been out, the more they rise in esteem. Obviously, this was pointed as like a very quote-unquote important movie. It's this big period epic with these beautiful, intricate costumes and set, and it was all shot on location in Ireland and all these elaborate battle sequences and things like that. So it's very easy to see how it's a very like Oscar-y movie. But I think it came down to in like this very distinct film year, the Academy is just like, and we kind of have one last slot to fill out. Let's give the Kubrick period drama, because Kubrick actually didn't get a ton of attention at the Oscars. He never won an Oscar himself. He's in that camp with Hitchcock, or at least for directing. I think he might have won one for screenplay at some point, but he never won a directing Oscar. So Kubrick was one of those guys who, despite in his time being considered, quote unquote, one of the greatest directors working today, if not the greatest director alive at the time, at the Oscars, he was kind of always the bridesmaid.
Yeah. 13 noms, one win.
Yeah. And his one win is basically on the coattails of Trumbull, who was the real special effects supervisor. Obviously, Kubrick developed a lot of camera techniques that would then be adopted later. But that was like, it's like one of those things. So it was like, that's a gimme.
Yeah.
Like, obviously, we're going to give 2001 special effects, but like, it wasn't necessarily because of Kubrick.
Yeah.
So yeah, he was one of those guys who, like, it was just one of those things that was like, we kind of have a slot to fill. This is a very, quote unquote, important movie. You know, it made money. It was a decent sized hit considering. It's one of those things that was like, Kubrick essentially got to make films on prestige alone, because like his films were not massive successes, with the exception of 2001, which a lot of people don't know now was the highest grossing film of this year. It was that weird time in the late 60s, early 70s when one of the most esoteric and arty movies and like this insane, quote unquote, achievement in cinema actually got seen by a very large audience.
Yeah.
So 2001 is essentially the blank check guarantor for Kubrick's entire career.
Yeah. Which the ironic thing is this movie was nominated for 7 Academy Awards. Mm-hmm. It won 4 of them. The 3 that didn't.
All of them are technical.
Yes.
The 3 that
didn't win are Kubrick.
Yeah. So I'm assuming like cinematography, costume.
Yeah. Cinematography, art direction, costume design, and original score.
Which is interesting because it's mostly actual classical pieces that are then reused.
Yeah.
Is it original score or adapted score?
It says best music scoring, original song score, and or adaptation. So I guess it includes
so
all of that.
That was sort of a blanket.
Yeah.
The 50s, 60s, and 70s, the music section of the Oscars are weird because they're like, adapted and original scores are different, and now they're the same category because movies, it was like we had more musicals then. We had, even if it wasn't a musical, we had more movies that just had songs in them and things like that.
Yeah. And what do you think Barry Lyndon's legacy is today?
I think Barry Lyndon's legacy today is just intertwined with Kubrick's entire filmography. I think it's kind of one of the forgotten Kubricks in general. I think when it's talked about, it's mainly on the production side. Like, it's obviously the quote-unquote the candlelight movie, despite there not actually being that many scenes that are solely lit by candlelight. So I think that's pretty much its outwarding legacy. Anytime I feel like Barry Lyndon is mentioned, it's sort of in Kubrick's oeuvre in general, which I think is unfair because I think it's actually I think it's one of those ones where it's just like everyone kind of avoids it because some people tell them it's lesser Kubrick. Yeah. And also because I feel like despite a large portion of Kubrick's filmography seem very unapproachable, this one seems the most unapproachable because it's the costume drama. There's always going to be people who have that sort of bias because like it's going to be Tony and sort of slow and it's going to put me to sleep.
Oh, Dan, by the way, before we started recording, gave me carte blanche to say Dan agrees with me 100%.
Yes.
So I'm going to say it. Scream. Great movie. I think it's a cinematic masterpiece.
What are other movies that Dan hates?
What are the things that Dan... Let me go on Dan's Letterboxd really quick and pull a fast one on this goofy little boy.
Well, Connor's doing that. Barry Lyndon. It's I genuinely recommend it to all you folks at home. Don't be discouraged by the 3-hour runtime. If anything, this is one of the few films I'm willing to make this suggestion. Watch it over 2 nights. First night, watch the first 90 minutes. Second night, watch the second 90 minutes. Obviously, a film is at its best when you watch it all the way through the way the director intends. But, you know, this is a post-pandemic world. We've all adapted our viewing styles. Sometimes you just got to watch something in chunks. Sometimes you got to treat the Snyder Cut like it's a miniseries. I get it. And Barry Lyndon does that very cleanly for you. So watch up to the intermission the first night, watch after the intermission the second night, and I think it will be a much more palatable experience for a lot of people. I think it's a very good film that more people should watch.
Yeah. And I agree with that sentiment completely. I think this movie is... I watched it like pretty much all the way through. I took like a 20-minute break to eat dinner.
Yeah.
But yeah. So yeah, Dan, he loves Titanic. Mm-hmm. He loves Scream. They're both great movies.
Oh, he has those basically on a loop in the background constantly.
Oh, Dan has said to me, actually, he says, Connor, The Dark Knight's pretty good.
Yeah.
When it comes to superhero cinema, it lives and dies in Batman Forever.
Yes.
And that's just a sentiment like we just all agree with. And Dan has said,
Yeah.
I fully speak for him here.
Yeah.
So I'm really happy that we were able to finally get this out in the open.
And in the upcoming presidential election, Dan supports
𝗓𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏.
Dan supports 𝗕𝗵𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏 Walker of the Replacement Party.
Okay, Dan, you're going to cut all that out. Sorry for a good fun bit. But if you do keep any of it, Dan, please keep Scream because it's very funny and Steve laughed.
Yeah.
Okay, so Steve, thank you for joining us. You're officially retired.
Yeah, probably.
Not
Unless-
actually fully. That
Yeah.
sounds like you're done with the show completely.
Yeah. Who knows what we'll do in the back half. But yeah, thank
true.
you guys for having me on for this. This was a very fun experience. Now I really need to watch Cuckoo's Nest, considering
Yeah.
it's the one that won, and I love all the other 4 films.
Hopefully you go cuckoo for
For
Cuckoo's
his
Nest.
But yeah, I love you guys, and I love talking to you guys about movies. It's my favorite thing. And thank you for letting me invade your airwaves for a very significant
long
portion
time.
of this insane, mammoth, unwheeling episode.
'Cause
It's
you're-
almost like this episode is our Nashville.
Nashville.
Connor, I'll see you at home.
Okay. I'm going to clap, and Steve will be gone.
Auf Wiedersehen.
Whoa! Hey Connor, what's up?
Yes.
I'm here now.
You're here now. So Dan's magically here.
Hello.
Through the magic of pausing a recording, talking for 10 minutes, and then you walking in where Steve was sitting.
Yep, the magic.
The magic. Sorry to break the illusion, kids. I know you think everything on the radio was real.
So I guess we are finally here at our final film of Best Picture 75. We're talking about the 1975 film.
I would wager, it flew over that cuckoo's nest.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, the movie is called One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
Yes.
If you're not aware, it won Best Picture that year.
Yes, we are finally at the Best Picture winner.
Yes. The second best movie in the Oscars 1975.
Yeah?
Yeah. For me, you don't know this because I settled to Stephen Clay back home. For me, this is controversial. Take it as you may.
Okay.
It's Dog Day, Cuckoo's Nest, Jaws, Linden, Nashville.
Interesting. Okay. All right. I can dig it. Do you want me to do mine?
Yeah, go for it.
My ranking of these movies? Sorry, I just had a milkshake.
Oh, you got a
So
lot of
it's-
dairy built up in there.
Yeah, it's not great. Basically, number 5, Barry Lyndon. Number 4, Jaws. Number 3, Dog Day. Number 2, Nashville. And number 1, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, which, if you recall, when I mentioned it in Nashville, this is the second official pick for what I think should win Best Picture 75. I ended up doing a tie between Nashville and One Flew Over.
Interesting.
Yeah. But honestly, One Flew Over just beats out Nashville by that much. I want to say I would tie it both, but when I talk about just my favorites in general, my favorite has got to be this one, and I'm happy that we're ending on it.
Yeah, I saw in Letterboxd you love this movie.
I do.
I think it's pretty darn good. So I'm going to say something probably controversial here. When I heard for the longest time that Nurse Ratched is the most iconic villain in cinema, I was under the impression that she was overtly evil, which she isn't. She's
Yeah.
just a nurse doing her job
It's
in the 60s.
yeah, it's the fact that Louise Fletcher humanizes Nurse Ratched so much.
Yeah.
That's what made the performance when we're talking
Yeah.
about her character.
Because obviously, Nurse Ratched does some terrible things in this movie. She's not a good person. But the actual villain of this movie is not Nurse Ratched, but just the healthcare system in the 60s
Exactly.
with mental health.
It's the institution.
It's literally the institution of institutions.
Yeah. And you want to do a quick summary of what the movie's
Oh,
about?
yes. So the movie follows this guy, McMurphy, played by Jack Nicholson, who is a criminal who is feigning the fact that he is mentally ill in order to get out of work detail at the prison. So he's sent to this institution, which I'm blanking on the name right now. And while there, obviously, him not being mentally ill, they're trying to prove if he is or not before they send him back to jail. And while there, he meets a group of mental patients played by iconic actors such as Danny DeVito and Brad Dourif, who got a supporting actor nom for this movie. He was very good in this movie.
Yeah.
And he's constantly butting heads with Nurse Ratched, played by the mentioned Louise Fletcher.
What did we think about this?
I think this movie is pretty darn good. There are scenes in this movie that are utterly incredible, but overall the film itself does not really like hit those high strides for me.
Yeah.
In terms of things that are incredible, basketball with Chief, when he's just like this, you hold it like this, you dunk it like this.
Yeah.
Their trip on the boat.
The boat trip, a really interesting addition to the film because if you might not know this, but this film was actually filmed chronologically.
Interesting.
The scenes were filmed in order, with the exception of the boat scene. There was a lot of contention whether that should even be added in the film. I believe Milos Forman at first was very against it because he wanted it completely within the mental institution, just in the one area. But they had the boat trip, and when they started putting in the cut, they realized how nice it was and what a great sequence it was. So yeah, that is for me one of the most interesting parts of the film, just going out into the world.
And then while I have issues with the ending in a story standpoint, the whole like Christmas party thing works incredibly well. And Scatman Crothers is amazing in that scene.
Yeah.
Like, are we doing like light, medium, heavy?
I would go medium spoilers.
Okay.
So we don't say the ending.
No.
The ending.
The iconic ending of this movie.
The iconic ending, but we can talk all the way up to.
Yeah. Because I was gonna say we won't touch the iconic ending of this movie, but I will mention that Mick Murphy, throughout like a good like half hour, maybe 45 minutes of this movie, has a chance to get out of the asylum, and he just doesn't take it.
I can imagine. I think that's kind of the point, especially when you're looking back on it, and you're realizing, I think, what's coming for everybody.
Yeah. And I get what they're trying to say, where he's like, he feels such a kinship with these people who are understood and who are like pushed away by society, and some which willingly, like they mentioned a lot of them committed themselves.
Yeah.
People who feel so outcast from society that they have to like willingly lock themselves away in a place that is not good for anybody.
Yeah.
These like terrible conditions.
It's such a interesting watch for me. I remember the first time I watched this, I was in just a film kind of essay writing class in high school, and we watched this like just on the thing is all of our classes were like 45 minutes in high school, so we would watch all of our movies in that class like over 3 days. And I would try my best to avoid the urge to know what would happen. Like, it took us an entire week to finish Godfather in class because we watched it there as well. But no, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest for me, just watching it in a classroom on a dark, rainy March week. I don't know, there's something so dreary about the entire film. Maybe because that was when I was watching it, but also just the subject matter. It's so insular. And it's so, I don't know, I guess the way Milos Forman frames you in the film, you're kind of trapped in there with them. There's no really escape from this world for the audience member. I feel like it's a very inclusive story. Yeah. In, I think, the most important way possible, Yeah,
you feel like you're in there with them, which is a big comment to this movie. And all of, like, I have issues with this movie's structure, the actual, like, narrative sometimes, like, choices. Yeah. But each performance is incredible. There's not, I would say, a bad performance this entire movie.
Agreed. I think they're all pretty strong. And I think it goes, I feel like the biggest thing for me when I consider why this was a Best Picture nominee, not just a winner, but a nominee, is because this is one of the most, I guess, impressive stories to read about what it was like making this movie. When you talk about the Academy representing the concept of making movies and like what it's like to be on set, to be in production of a film, and what lengths people go to achieve certain things. Like, I guess the idea of method acting and the fact that the entire crew and cast was stayed at the institution while they were filming it. And they even had members, like actual mentally ill people, working on the film at a point. Michael Douglas, in an article that I'll link below in the YouTube video for The Guardian, talked about how at one point they had an Alcinist working on alt direction for the film. I find that so just eye-opening, to the fact that like this is, in so few words, very close to almost a documentary-esque real-life depiction. it's a fictional story that is kind of shoved into this real place.
Yeah.
You know, and that's what's so powerful about
The film
this
has an inherent honesty.
Exactly.
Especially with someone was also talking about performances. Christopher Lloyd, who I did not know was even in this movie, like blew my socks off.
Yeah.
There's the bit where he has the match in his pants and he freaks out, and just like the visceral nature of his performance and like what he is putting his body through in that moment is nuts. The level of commitment and honesty through each of these people. DeVito, who I was very
Danny
impressed by.
DeVito as originally got on the project because he was Michael Douglas's roommate back in the late 60s.
I did not know that.
Yes. It's one of they're like old friends. Like they were old friends, and yeah, he was one of the first people to be cast in the film.
Interesting.
Due to that, yeah.
Yeah, no, he's great as Martini.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously, he mentioned Brad Dourif as Billy Bibbit.
Mm-hmm.
Incredible guy. And I also I just love Brad Dourif. I just think he's a great actor.
Yeah.
Spelled differently, but him and Stephen Dorff, I think, are both two guys who are both heavily unappreciated in Hollywood.
Yeah, I agree.
They're really good guys. And obviously, Brad Dourif. I'm getting mixed up now.
Yeah.
Brad Dourif, the voice of Chucky.
Yes.
Like a horror icon that just
Yeah.
does not really get his due outside of like this one Oscar nom, and just like him going to conventions like, you're that guy who's the scary guy in Dune, or you're Chucky, or like stuff like that, or in Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, you have him in Lord of the Rings.
Where he's Wormtongue, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And you also have him in some other smaller parts when you're looking at like his work with David Lynch.
Yeah.
Blue Velvet, Dune. I look back at this film, and we're at a point where we're talking about the Best Picture nominees, but this, at the end of the day, is the one that won. This is the film where the Academy said it won. And it didn't just win this. This is the movie to sweep the big five.
Yeah.
The big, the big five Oscars: actor, actress, director, picture, and screenplay. Correct?
Yeah. But it's only been done a few times before and a few times since.
Exactly. But yeah, I mean, I guess if I have a question for you, Connor, if it's anything, why do you think this is the movie that won? Out of these five pretty powerful films that are statements to what Hollywood was coming out with in 1975.
Yeah. Why did it win? That is a very good question. I think that honesty is a big part of it. And while there's other films that are very honest, like Dog Day is, like we mentioned,
Mm-hmm.
I just think it just, as the kids say, it just hit. Like it just worked.
Well, I think a follow-up question to that is, do you think it has anything to do with a lot of people who revere this as one of the greatest book adaptations to film in all of cinema history?
That could be it as well. I would have to read the novel in all, like, not to be that boring guy. It was like, maybe I'd have to see.
Yeah.
But it's like, I'd have to read the book. But that's what I've heard, is it's very faithful to the novel.
Yeah.
And I think it's a thing where it's the Oscars are a preferential ballot system for Best Picture.
Yeah.
And I think just enough people really liked it. If it wasn't their favorite, it's just one that stuck with them. So if it wasn't number one, it was their two or their three, and that's enough to get it the win. I think it's just a movie that just works for a lot of people, and I think that's its thing. While it does deal with a lot of complex stuff, it doesn't have as many, like, air quotes, deterrents as something like Dog Day or Nashville or Barry Lyndon, where it's a thing where it's like, it's not accessible, but it's just it allows you to get enveloped in it, like you mentioned. And I think that overall, like, open arm approach just put in a lot of people's 1, 2, and 3s.
Yeah. I mean, that makes all the sense, really.
Yeah.
I think another thing I want to talk about is definitely just the relationship between Milos Forman and Jack Nicholson on this set, which at points became very strained, and they would only talk to each other through the cinematographer, who ended up also getting replaced as well. Like, they had two cinematographers, and Nicholson would not talk to Forman unless it was through one of the cinematographers. But, like, at the same time, with all that tension, in this article, Michael Douglas himself also talks about how Jack Nicholson was also the driving force behind everyone, as Douglas puts it, bringing their A game and, like, kind of making this film as amazing as possible with, like, his energy and just him kind of rallying everyone. Because like I think that is just a very inherent of his nature.
Yeah. When the lead actor or the director is someone so heavily invested and so caring about the product they're doing, that energy is contagious. It flows to the entire set. I can't name names because that'd be a big bad for me being a guy trying to work in this industry. But I have worked on a couple shorts and even a feature where the crew just didn't believe in the director. And it was very apparent, and that energy just like, not poisoned, but it very much was harmful to the energy of that set.
Yeah.
And there was a guy where I was talking to a couple grips, and the guy even directly said, it was like, I'm willing to go overtime anytime for something I believe in. I never want to go overtime for this movie because I don't trust the guy, the director.
Yeah.
Which
absolutely.
obviously I'm not going to name names, but...
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I think for me, I mean, with my personal experience of being on a film set and kind of trying to relate that to a movie like One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, and kind of talking about how like this was such an immersive filmmaking experience, which is why I think it gets the accolades it does, is because this is really an example of prime filmmaking, like the process over the product in a sense. I mean, for me, on the flip side, I've had some truly jaw-dropping, inspirational, and just euphoric moments on film sets. And it's bizarre when you get in that energy, when you just feel something coming up, and everyone's just kind of in the moment like that, and you're capturing these amazing things, you know?
Exactly, yeah.
And that's always really special to be a part of. And it just goes to show, like, you and I, we have these select moments, these few moments where we felt it, you know, where it's like not as good of a set or a great set, or it's just a good scene that was shot, a great fun shot that was like constructed.
Yeah, I mean, not to toot your own horn, but you have a movie that's called 𝗕RIO Extraño.
Oh, my
And there's
short-
a couple
my
one-take
sophomore film.
sequences that when we pulled those off, it's some of the best feelings I've had on a set, period.
Yeah.
Because I was for a context, for those who don't know, I was Dan's AD for that movie, and I didn't think we were going to be able to get those one-take shots that involved a car and our actors running and passing a camera in and out of a car window. Complete lunacy. And I thought Dan was a madman when he suggested it to me. But he pulled it off, and he pulled it off in less than the allotted time I had given him. So...
And I thank you for keeping me on a leash.
Yes.
But I mean, at the end of the day, you look at a movie like One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. Imagine feeling those kind of feelings for weeks on end and being fully immersed, living on set, and just waking up every morning in that world. I mean, it's absolutely just mind-bending.
Yeah.
I guess if we're moving on to the journey to the Oscars for this movie, this is the one that won. So this is the one that gets talked about.
Yes.
Like the journey to the Oscars. The other one's kind of hard to find stuff on. But this one there's a lot. There's a lot to say because everyone looked back and wanted to document why this film, among others, that night was chosen. And yeah, I think you make a really salient point with the fact that One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest might have been the one that kind of split the difference. I think the other four films stand apart from One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest because they can be divisive in their own ways. You know, like I can see someone with more of a forward-thinking blockbuster moment choosing Jaws, or someone wanting to finally give Kubrick his time in the sun for best like picture and really best director as well, if we're talking about that. And kind of you have Nashville as well, which is and Dog Day, both encapsulations very different but also similar encapsulations of the modern sentiment of what it's like to be in America right now, and the tension and stress and madness that came with that in the mid-1970s. But then you have One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, a very kind of dejected piece of discussing American culture and through mental health and institutionalized mental health. And the idea that, I guess, this feels like the most universal film out of the five. You know?
Yeah.
Like everything else has a very specific intention or audience. But One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, I think this is a movie that can be for everyone. which is why
Why
I think
are you winking at me?
I'm not.
Okay, you've done it. I think you just have something in your eye.
I think I do.
You
I think
keep
it's straight.
winking, and I was like, "Are you trying to tell me something?"
Oh, sorry.
Okay, no, you're fine. I just wanted to make sure I'm not missing something completely.
You're not. You're
'Cause
not.
like, it's like completely innocuous. Like Jaws also has that. And I was like, "What are you doing? What is this?"
Jaws.
Dan put on sunglasses for context. Even though this is all gonna be cut out.
All gonna be cut.
So
but
what I was saying, like
yeah.
I said, if I was in the voter of the Academy that year,
Mm-hmm.
I for sure would go Dog Day. But if, like I mentioned, preferential ballot, my number 2 would have been Cuckoo's Nest.
Yeah.
So I probably would have played a part in it getting the win.
Heck yeah. And I guess if we want to go on to the final section, the legacy of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
Yeah. Which, it's massive.
Yeah, it is.
I've been scrolling through just the IMDb connections page, where it's movies that reference Cuckoo's Nest. And there's a lot.
Yeah.
It's also just it's influential for people everywhere. It's
Yeah.
like, I'm sure, because every movie has this, but some more than others, where someone watched Cuckoo's Nest in 1975 and is like, I want to make movies.
Yeah, I
That's
think
what movies can be.
This was very influential for artists and people who entered the industry after it. You know, more so than I think just the mainstream audience.
Yeah.
But even then, I still think this movie had an impact in the mainstream. You know,
Yeah.
I think that's a lot of just help with Jack Nicholson, having him on the ticket. You know, but I mean, I look back and I can't help but think that I'm so happy this is the one that has one of the most lasting impressions on me personally, but I would hope on other people.
I would argue in general.
Yeah, I mean, I guess aside from Jaws, this is, you know, I mean, Kubrick, obviously always forward-thinking with his visual style, and you have, but not unsympathetic look at transgender culture and transgender identity in Dog Day, and you have just breaking filmmaking molds in Nashville, and then you have this really in-depth look into mental health. I mean,
Yeah.
like, when before did we see a film like this?
Yeah.
Never.
Especially in 1975, with those things obviously were still very much taboo. The fact that 3 of the 5 movies, like you mentioned, have this like broad, like not broad, but like more. I guess technically it's the opposite of broad. It is a more focused, like social view about issues that even then were more like even now I should say, are still like somewhat controversial.
Yeah.
But these movies are, go about that and speak about them in ways that just people weren't. Even with the end of Nashville and what that's saying about American culture. This movie this year is very weirdly like critical of America, which usually we don't see from like the Oscars Best Picture race.
Yeah,
especially in this
exactly.
period.
Which I can't help but respect in a sense, which is why I feel like this, of all years in the 70s, was the true 1970s Best Picture nominees.
Yeah.
You know, like this was the one, at least of the decade, that captured, I think, the eye of where we were as just a people, nationally, internationally, you know. And what I like is that all these messages, discussing these topics, and specifically mental health with One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, with the winner, that's timeless. That is always something how our society handles mental health. That is a timeless critique. That is a timeless conversation, and is a timeless topic that I think obviously we're still battling with it today. In I think a very different context, but being able to go back and say, this is it's not just our generation. It's not just where the world is now. It's something we as a society have always dealt with. It's nice to have this stamp in time to always be a reminder of that. That's what's huge. So at the end of the day, a legacy, good on you, Academy. I think you picked the right one,
Yeah.
I mean, personally, my 2 picks, as I said, a tie for One Flew Over Nashville, but a big part of that is just because I really like what Nashville says about like America in 1975, 76, but the true winner, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, for sure.
Never mind. I was gonna think of one of those jokes where like blank stood so blank could fly, but I can't.
Yeah.
Cuckoo's Nest did not ride any of those coattails. It was its own movie.
It was.
And it came out of there swinging. And while it wouldn't have been the choice I would have made, like I mentioned, like 3 times a day with Dog Day, I do think it is a very deserved win for all the reasons we've talked about.
Yeah.
Well, Dan, this is especially our longest recording by a long shot.
By a while. We are over 2 hours.
We are, you know what's something funny? We're longer than One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest right now.
We're longer than a lot of these movies. Well,
We're-
not a lot.
we're
We're
longer
longer
than-
than like 2 of them.
I think we're longer than all of them but
But
Barry Lyndon.
No,
Yeah.
Nashville's longer.
Oh, in Nashville.
We're longer than 3 of them.
Yeah.
Because Dog Day, Jaws, and they're all like flat too.
Yeah. So,
It's
yeah.
funny.
We there's always be a weight cut down for you guys, and it's gonna be 2 parts on the radio.
Mm-hmm.
So Dan, I don't envy you to cut this down from 2:17 to an hour for the radio,
It's going to be rough,
but
but
you
I'm
can do
here
it.
for it.
I believe in you. Well, guys, thank you for joining us for this massive, massive undertaking.
Yeah, thank you so much for listening. If you're still listening in, this has been, I think, something we've been really excited to talk about.
Yeah.
I'm so happy we've gotten the chance to make Best Picture 75 happen. I think that couldn't have happened without support, obviously, from the Champlain Wave and from Steve. Steve
Yeah,
Aaron, of
Steve, our
course.
best friend.
Yes. He's not with us now, but thank you so much, Steve, for being on. Always an integral part of any episode we have you with. So, yeah.
Yeah.
You wanna plug anything?
Well, Dan, you know what? I think I'm going to do something different today, actually.
Oh.
I think I'm going to plug my Letterboxd. So my Letterboxd is it's Cranberry 18. That is CRAND 18. And you can follow me on Letterboxd to see everything we've talked about today and in the past and in the future. And I'm glad that joke hit for you, Dan.
Oh.
And hopefully you guys at home like that as well.
Why did I believe you? I'm gonna do something different, he says. Oh, I love it.
Okay,
Oh.
and thank you so much for joining us, guys, as always. And as my time begins to wrap up here on Filmland, I just get very, very thoughty about...
Bro!
Here's the thing. That means something else. I
I
can't
get very
say that.
thoughty,
get
my
very-
guy.
Here's the thing.
Thoughtful.
There we
you
go,
get
yeah.
thoughtful.
Yeah, that's a good one. That's a good quote section. Anyway, as my time begins to wrap up here on Filmland, I get very introspective about like what this thing is. And obviously, it's just me and my friend in a room for like 30 minutes to an hour every week. But it's just something special and something I really care about and something I love doing for you guys. And I'm bummed to leave in the next month or so. I think I was talking to Dan. I think I only have 3 episodes left.
About, yeah.
So we don't know what those are yet. So we're gonna find out what my 3 last episodes are, and depending on if we get like Zoom working or something, maybe I'll come back as a guest next season. Who knows what the world has in store? But yeah, thanks for joining us, guys. As always, thanks for sticking around. If you've been listening since like season 1, first of all,
How?
we've given you so many prompts.
Yeah.
How have you never responded to me and Dan? How have you never like come at me and Eats and been like,
Hey,
it should be do I tell her?
It should
How
be
have
do
you
I
how
tell
have you never? But if you're shy, we appreciate you.
Yes,
And,
absolutely.
Yeah, I've been rambling for the longest time.
Go ahead.
But thanks for listening, guys. You'll hear us again next week.